the last few videos or episodes, depending on if you listen to the audio or video version of this, I've been talking about human design, the gene keys, focused on my experience, where I'm coming from, what's affected my approach to these systems. And I want to come back to the roots, or one of the roots to both of these, which is astrology. And I feel like it's a bit tricky for me to even talk about it because I made a decision not to focus specifically on astrology. I focus on these kind of outgrowths that come out of astrology that's based on those methods that are used in astrology, such as human design and gene keys, which are based on planetary activations. This idea that the placements of the planets and the luminaries, the sun and the moon, can have some influence on a human life or on the person, the qualities, and more than just a person, on like the background frequency that we experience, the game we're currently playing, and in this world. And what I believe is at the very core of this whole idea, this whole approach to be able to even see these physical objects, these huge spheres out there in space, how we can even see them connected to us, is you have to have a perspective of the universe as relational. And that was the one thing that really clicked in me and that really shifted my view and made me open up more to the idea that, oh, maybe, yeah, that made my skeptic kind of pause for a bit and be like, yeah, okay, yeah, if we see everything as relational, why wouldn't we have some connection to these planetary bodies or the whole space overall? Maybe even further reaches of space that we don't really think of, or how do we know? Like, if we're basically connected to everything, then yeah, why not? And that's also a good question to have. Why is a good question, but also why not? Because the why not is a question that makes you kind of question your questioning of why would this be possible? Then you can also ask, like, well, why wouldn't it be? Or if there's no counter proof, like, we can just play with the idea, at least makes it more fun. And to be honest, I think astrology, that was like the first, this is maybe a weird metaphor, but it's almost like that initiatory gateway drug. It's if you can get behind that idea in some way, if you can be open to the idea that we're existing in this relational world and that the astrological methods can have some value, then of course, why couldn't it have effect on like the energy centers of the human body? And in gene keys, like even considering the genes, the DNA, a part of this huge multidimensional tapestry of life, of energy. So that was like, there was something in astrology that kept pulling me towards it. And at the same time, I was incredibly skeptical and critical, maybe because of that textbook I had in school, where it was so clearly stated that back in the days humans were so superstitious that they even believed that these planets could have some effect. And that was maybe lodged somewhere deep in my mind, because on the other hand, I kept having that in my mind. And then I had started to experience more and more people spreading things or about astrology, or my friends or people like really describing themselves in terms of like, oh, I'm a Aries rising and a Taurus moon and a Leo sun, or like, these things. Or maybe just saying like I'm a Gemini, just focusing on the sun signs that most people do. And then that started bugging me because I kept hearing so much of these descriptions of people identifying with these things. I was like, what do you actually mean when you say that? What what is that identification about? And I couldn't really connect to it fully myself because I'm really aware of when those boxes are put onto me, like when a friend or someone tells me that, oh, you're a Gemini, so you're like that, and I'm like, am I really? Maybe that's also a Gemini thing to do. It's like, can't capture me in a box. I'm all over the place. I'm a bit of everything. But so because I had this kind of weird like cognitive dissonance, I guess, between that wiring, and then on the other hand people really like using astrology more and more to have as a core of their identity, I was like, okay, I have to get into this. I have to really learn like what it's about. I have to understand how it's built, how it's made. And if you understand human design, it's helpful to know that I have a first line. I'm a 1-3 investigative martyr. So I really have to get to the bottom of things, and then I have to experiment with it until I figure out like or feel it myself and bump into things that this works, this doesn't, at least for me, and these are like the findings. And that's what I'm doing right now, basically. So sharing about that process. And so I started studying about astrology because it was bugging me that it was used so widely and I didn't understand like what's it based on, where is it coming from, why, and then at first I was actually discarding it because of that wiring that said like superstition and so on. And I was very into energy. I had felt at that time like I I had felt the way energy exists or affects us within between each other, but then that was like a next step of like, oh, these like planetary bodies and space would also affect us. And at at that point, I think it was back in 2017, 2018, I have had just kind of started this journey of going inwards or trying to find what's like the deeper truth of my existence that I feel. So with astrology, there was kind of this contradictory stance. And the thing that switched it, that shifted it, was there was one person who I respected and thought was like a sensible person, and they told me that they were really into astrology. I was like, oh, if this person is into it, then maybe it's not like all bad, or how we affect each other. And that person then had that effect, and I was like, oh, okay, I can also look into it. Like it helped to open me up a little bit. And so yeah, I would just study, do these self-study courses on different platforms. And then lately I've been also taking workshops with Kelsey Rose Tortorici, and just listening to people talk about astrology, actually, or people who relate to um, these things, that you can feel people that are really attuned to some kind of broader overarching realm. And I don't think I'm, in a way, yeah, everyone is connected to everything. We're all connected to this, if you believe in that relationality. But my focus isn't out there, as I was already said, like in the human design episode. It was, I think I was meant to come back here and be with the humans, like in this realm, in this place, your existence, your experience, and those are in the background. So of course it's relevant, but that's not like where I shine my light. That's not where my focus is. It's not out there, it's more like here. And then I really respected it when I could hear someone talking and it was something that I heard was grounded in their own experience talking about these things, and it felt like on some level it felt much more scientifically grounded, or empirically I should say, because it was so based on that experience, that direct, those findings you had gotten from your life, from having experienced these transits, these planetary cycles for your whole life, and connecting back to your experience, I started to really shift the way that I view science, the way that I view understanding or knowledge, and was more opened up to that idea that, of course, if energies are real, as I believe they are, and we're all energy, like, why wouldn't those planets and space overall, like, why wouldn't everything be able to affect everything in a way? And I don't think it's just like a human kind of self-centered view that, oh, we humans are so special that even the planets have a say in our lives, which can sometimes kind of feel like that. But I think it's more like connecting to, attuning to that background energy that's like a kind of vaster, or kind of enveloping us all, because we're part of this solar system. And when I realized that relational view, when I realized that value, that beauty in that view, and how more than just understanding with my mind, how it made me feel connected to everything, then it clicked. And then I realized that I can be skeptical with my mind. I can still hold many perspectives, but there's something that feels better to exist in a way where I feel related to everything. It just feels nice to, so I kind of chose to align myself with that perspective more, but still being a bit skeptical if someone comes to me and says like, oh, because you're a Gemini, you're like that, and it's like, yeah, but in the end, just trying to find back to the thread, because I felt like I said all of the things I wanted to say in 12 minutes instead of kind of going in a order through all of them, and trying to consider or get back to what it was that I wanted to say. Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, if I want to just keep a bit of this skeptical stance, I would say that I have some views of how, something I want to bring up is that all of these kind of archetypal descriptions about the planets, how they are connected to different gods and to different energies or archetypal energies, they are based on a certain cultural context, a certain kind of belief system, or yeah, at least the way that I have been, of course, more exposed to Western astrology, and how those are connected to, for example, the planet Venus. Well, that's connected to Venus or Aphrodite, or um, yeah, kind of this goddess, and the same with Jupiter and Saturn. Like, they are all those stories, those characters, those energies are kind of a human meaning making process of trying to find patterns to describe our existence, trying to describe these different energies that we experience. And then that skeptical side of me can be like, yeah, but Why did you choose that story? Or is it really that that planet has those properties? Or is it that because we have attached those properties or those archetypal roles or energies to those planets, that's why we create this like huge egregore or mental construct that people, enough people who find out or learn about astrology connect to that construct, and then you're kind of giving energy to that whole construct by learning about it and by like me telling about it, or that we're like, yeah, yeah, that's exactly the energy of Jupiter, and that's such a mercurial thing, or like that skeptic in me is like, yeah, but what if we would have described them in a totally different way? I'm still a bit like, I can feel there is something deeper there. We have this whole idea of the collective unconscious, and there's something there. But at the same time, the skeptic in me has to point out that what if those stories or those characters, those would have been described in a totally different way, and they have been in other cultural contexts. I wrote a bit about this in a Substack post. I can share a link in the show notes where I was pointing out, for example, that the Sami people had totally different names for the constellations that were based on what was relevant for them in their culture, like Sarvis, like this character that was like a horned being, maybe connected to the reindeer, and that because we're focused so much on the Western astrology, at least in my context, then it feels like that's also starting to overwrite all of the nuance, or there's a risk that it could start to overwrite like this one story. This is it, this is what the stars are, this is what the planets are, is overwriting every other possible explanation or every other possible story or way of making meaning of them. And that's the one thing that I still keep coming back to, is like, yeah, I can feel like it's fun to play with the idea of like, oh, that's such a Venus energy or Mars energy, like the drive, the power, the assurance, or that kind of soft feminine receiving beauty, the values. But also, what? No, if it goes into a too restrictive place, I have to point out, like, yeah, but we could also, like, maybe experience them differently, or at least, like, that there's an openness to allow the energies to show themselves instead of deciding this is what it is, this is the only thing it can be. And that's all of these different stances, perspectives exist. And again, if someone wants to have very clear categories, maybe that's right for them. Maybe that's good that that exists. That's not my role, but that can exist too. My role is to be like poking at those categories, like, no, what if we what if we would see them in a totally different way? To play with that construction that humans make with their minds all the time. And that's the fun thing. They are constructions and they can help us. They can be fun to play with, but it's not, maybe for me, it's not like the only truth. But maybe I don't have that kind of a only truth. Maybe my truth is the process itself. And whether you resonate with that or not is up to you, or how similar your process is, or if it's different. Maybe you're here to share that one very specific box. That's beautiful too. It's just a different process to mine. And so when I connect to astrology, I would usually, I'm coming from a very different place than someone who is relating very specifically to those descriptions that are usually described for each planet or each constellation. I'm like, oh, we can play with that as an energy, and it's helpful for us to get that language to even talk about our lives in terms of how could my life be connected to these archetypal energies. And that's beautiful how that can give me that framework, that language to connect, to be like describing my mercurial nature, with just having those tools, or like those characters to play with in describing my life. But that's what I'm doing. I'm kind of playing with it. And another person might be more fully embodying it because they feel it in a different way than maybe I do. And that's true for them. And so a few years back, I even, in this whole process that I have for many years now, had this process with astrology where I'm really like having this kind of paradoxical approach or a dissonance in my mind where I know some things have value. I've felt like them in my own life, how just attuning to those energies or shifts or transits has opened up a new possibility of understanding my experience or feeling into it or being more open to surrender to that background energy that I can feel, while on the other hand also questioning it if it is actually the planets themselves or the neutrino stream that's spoken about in human design and gene keys. They have like this physical, more physically based explanation that the stream of neutrinos, as they are filtered through the different planets, they have their own kind of energy that then affects us. That's why it has a direct effect on our body as we're born, our body graph. That's what it's built up on, like those systems. And since I'm not the scientist who can study those things directly, then oh, I heard my toddler came home from the test day at the daycare. I have to pause a bit. My toddler is starting to go to daycare now. Just a few hours to begin with, and they really enjoy actually just being there, get to play with other kids. And it's to us, the parents, that it feels like, oh, can I leave her for 1 hour? They tell me to go and just let her be there. It's a bit terrifying when you've been so attached to this being, this baby, and then now they're just, oh, I want to go around and climb everywhere and explore everything on my own, like just, yeah, different, a very different stage, a real chance to practice the art of letting go, of being connected while at the same time allowing that person to develop, expand their world by taking a step back and letting them have their own experience first and foremost, and then be there as a support when they need it. There's so much I learned from parenting on so many levels, and it has really affected my approach or my view, my life. I mean, yeah, it's a full-on transformation, of course. But I'll try to find my way back to what point I was trying to make before, or maybe I'll just shift to something new. I think I want to continue to a more practical place. I want to shift this podcast into to at least present some ways that what I'm saying can be used, like giving a kind of tool set that you can take from and then apply in your own life. And the way that I do that is by sharing my own stories, by sharing how I do those things, and then you can like compare to that and see what resonates with you and what inspires you and what doesn't. And one of the practical values, or practical on some level, that I found in going deeper into astrology and learning more about the roots or the deep, like the methods behind it, was that for most of my life, my view on astrology was what I guess the mainstream or people who don't go deeper into it, then maybe you only know your sun sign. So that's the month where you were born, where the sun was, against what constellation the sun was at that moment. And for me, born in June, that was Gemini. So for most of my life, then I did hear all of these descriptions about me, about how I'm really this like flighty all over the place, like just in the mind. And it's not inaccurate, but it's not really the full truth, or it can really feel like it creates this very restrictive, narrow box that, like, that's all I am. That's all I am. So if that's your only exposure to astrology, that's no wonder you get critical or skeptical, because who wants to be, at least a kind of person like me, it feels like painful to be put into only that little box. While maybe for some other person that brings comfort and feels like, yes, like that gives me a northern star that will guide me, that I'm a Capricorn, so I'm practical, I'm steady. If that's how you view it, then you maybe get some power from that. So I guess it can have that kind of beneficial aspect. But for me, as a spokesperson for the multidimensional view, it really helped to learn about, like, oh, we don't need to get stuck in only the sun sign. We can see it like a palette of all these different planets, all these different constellations, anything like out there that could have its relation to us, that we can relate to, that symbolize different archetypal forces or energies that are connected to us, to each and every one of us. Everyone has every constellation, every every planet in some position, in some way, in different ways. And then it started to open up, like, oh, this is fun, because now I can like see the differentiation, the variation between people, like, oh, and I got a more multidimensional perspective on myself, where it's like, wow, I'm a Gemini with the sun position, at least according to that tropical system. But if I then look at where the moon was, that adds its own flavor, and I have a moon in Aries, I guess you say in English. And that brings some really like fiery energy. And whoa, I do relate to that with my moon, that whole realm of nurturing or emotional depths. And that has some fiery energy to it for sure. And my emotional experience in the forefront for me. And I could really actually relate to that. And it's like, yeah, that can be a relief. And because those things have felt accurate to me, that's why I haven't discarded it outright. That's why I still use these tools in the ways that it feels useful to me. And then, like the third one that people usually talk about is the ascendant, which is then connected to house systems. That I'm not gonna go down into those details in this episode, but the Scorpio kind of brought that depth and that transformative power of, yeah, oh, like, so if I have this Gemini sun, suddenly, like, it's all kind of expanded out into a more multidimensional picture with all of these different, well, first these luminaries and the ascendant, and then we add all the different planets like Venus and Mars and Jupiter in Leo. That brings its own energy. Everything brings its own energies, and it's a fun system to play around with. If that's what you want to do, it can also be overwhelming. Maybe it's not for everyone. And for me, I kind of tried to navigate that balancing act of like, yeah, I can look into it and take what resonates and really feel into it. How does that feel? How does that shift the way I see myself, the way I describe myself? Or how does that make me more aware of those sides of me that, for example, that Scorpio ascendant, that kind of maybe some kind of power or a will to approach the world in a way that I really want to go to the depths, just for the sake of going to the depths. And kind of that's what I'm doing here too, and to the depths of myself, because that's the ascendant, that's the first house, which is really focused on yourself. And through going deep into myself, that's how I can then share about those findings to others and that transformation with others, which is then that maybe Sun and Mercury in Gemini in the 8th house, if you speak astrology. And yeah, it's then when I really went deeper into and learned how these things are made up and what it's built on, it did create a fuller, paint a fuller picture and become much more fun. And I was a bit less skeptical, or maybe not less, but I could see, I could balance that skeptical side with, these things are cool, these have value for me, this is fun. This can still be kind of criticized for at least the Western context where I grew up in, like overwriting any other potential meanings or so on. Like, but this is what I have to work with. And it helped me to learn about all these different dimensions in astrology, because then now if someone comes and tells me like, oh, you're a Gemini, so you're just like that, I can be like, yeah, but I'm so much more. I mean, I would be even without astrology, but I know even within that framework, there's so much more. There's so much more. And it can feel a bit overwhelming sometimes. And that's why I'm not focused on astrology per se. I appreciate it for what value it can bring, and for the way that it has also helped to create these other frameworks that I have used a bit more actively, because I know I've felt it, I've experienced it, the way they have helped shift my approach. And in the end, like, I don't really know if it matters that much if I don't fully understand it. How do these things relate to us? I know the universe is relational, it just is. That's how it feels. That feels true to my soul. So, skeptic or not, it just feels true to my soul. And I can't really say if it's that egregore or mental model of those descriptions, or if it is some deeper archetypal energy that just is there, a part of the way that our particular solar system or universe has been constructed by who? By source, all, by God, whatever you call it. Hmm, I don't know. I don't need to know. It's interesting to explore, and I look forward to sharing more of these explorations, and invite you to add your own. Like, you can send me an email or comment on some of the posts I do. If you find my, mostly I think I'm active on Instagram, trying to at least check if someone has written something, but I'm also not that active. Like, I focus on right now, like, oh, I'm posting, I'm sharing my thing, and it's better for me to keep a bit of distance from social media to not get too swept into it, which can be the risk. Because right now I'm in this stage where I have all these things that have been building up over the years, and also over this parental leave that have been kind of bubbling and integrating, and now I feel like I'm in a stage of really needing to focus my energy on like get it out, get it out. And then there might come a stage where like, okay, step back a bit and again take in. But I'm really, yeah, interested in hearing your views or your own experiences, whether it's a more skeptical, critical stance or just like savoring it and this has really helped me or transformed my life for the better or like whatever it is. So feel free to share. Just that maintain that playful curiosity. And that's what I'm here for. And I hope I can share some of that to others. Take care.